David Goldberg with Penn State.
Thank you. This is my fourth Geodesign Summit, so I'm a long-time listener but a first-time caller, so I feel good to be on this stage right now. What I'm going to talk about, again, is similar to our last presenter, a single course in our Penn State program, but I want to contextualize it with the Geodesign program at Penn State. Here's the clicker. So Geodesign at Penn State, you might have seen our booth out there. It talks a lot about what our program is, but we have three options to it: a Master of Professional Studies, a Graduate Certificate in Geodesign, and we also have a Geodesign option within the current MGIS program. Our program is deeply rooted in Dr. Seinetz's curriculum, or Dr. Seinetz's framework, and it was guided by an international advisory team. And that actually comes to play in this project, that advisory team. And it's offered completely on Penn State's World Campus. This is our program. These are the three options in there, and these are the course sequences. And I want to talk about, again, my course in the sequence as it works. So the way we actually worked with this, how do these courses work within the framework? So our first course is a theory course that actually works within the first iteration of the framework, the scoping of the geodesign study. The second sequence of courses are our model courses, and that really looks at the specifying the methods, or the second iteration of Dr. Seinetz's framework. And the third sequence in our course, our courses are studios. And those only happen in the NPS program, but that follows the third iteration of the framework. Now, the model courses, we looked to condense our curriculum, and we looked at 6 models and 3 courses. Actually, it's outlined in Carl's book as well. So we did the paired relationships, the knowledge, the information, and the data. The course I'm going to talk about is the Models 1, or Evaluation and Decision course. And we looked at decision modeling and evaluation modeling as 2 separate components. But of course, if you know about we all know about the Geodesign framework, you can't really take these things out, right? They're completely interdependent on each other, and so we can't really connect those out, but we need, how do we teach this thing without, as two different courses within the, 2 different models within the framework. So first of all, we worked as teams. Geodesign is a team sport. We want to make sure our students in the first model course are working as teams. We had our students read relevant case studies and methods. We actually had our students role play stakeholders. We also provided a set of givens. So this is how we filled in those pieces. We provided a set of givens, assumptions, essentially gave them the data and the information about the model or about the study. And we also asked our students, so the goal was to derive measurable indicators that are pertinent to the decision evaluation of the study, or indicators to evaluate scenarios, if you will. So the project. Well, the project really doesn't matter as much. Let me preface this. The project is a widget. The project is something that I want all the students to focus on. Now, with an international group of students, we want that project to be that they can relate to, and that we chose a transportation project. The transportation project was actually provided to us by one of our advisory members, Jim Sipes, who just finished up a really cool transportation project in Tennessee. So the project is a Tennessee Department of Transportation study of the proposed roadway improvements of the Ocoee River Gorge section of Corridor K. It's a 24-mile section of Route 64, but the projects were really addressing safety issues, improve roadway deficiencies, safety issues, as I mentioned, support or enhance local and regional transportation networks, and also enhance the sustainable economic growth in the region. By the way, that video that you just saw there was a news team that was there when they heard the cracking sound. They did not know that was going to happen. They just evacuated within minutes of a road crew that was actually working on the road. We provided them the scenarios. So we have a set of options that were done by the professional design team in this project. Interestingly enough, this project did not have a completed environmental impact statement, so that was not available to the students. However, the scenarios were. So the collaboration is really what I'm focusing on in this talk, and how do we actually work with geodispersed teams. So here's our asynchronous toolbox. We looked at ELMS, we used ELMS for our course lessons and contents. We used Yammer for our discussions, VoiceThread, which is a cool thing we'll see in a minute, presentations for peer review. MindMeister is a hosted web whiteboarding kind of service. We use ArcGIS Online for simple shared maps, and Angel just for our course submittal and grading, and we'll be using Canvas in the future. The course. So the course delivery, as I said, we used the ELM space. So we had the space to actually talk about some lessons, guiding questions, the readings, the activities. They're all hosted in kind of a static web page of sorts. The Yammer was really a Facebook without all the distractions. It was all the discussions happening there, relevant threads that we actually work with a Yammer discussion forum for the studio. The course schedule, this is an optimistic view of schedule, by the way, that we would have a new lesson on Monday. On Wednesday, we'd have the mid-week and structure check-in, because all the students have been working since Monday to Wednesday. No. Friday, we'd have team collaboration component, because all the students would have everything done by Friday. No. And Saturday and Sunday, we would have the students actually working on their individual projects, and everyone would turn their projects in promptly at 8 p.m., Eastern Standard Time. Well, we had the challenge of international dateline in this class, and so that caused all sorts of things, confusion for me personally, on how this actually works. Course schedule, this is a rough down, it was an 8-week class, by the way, or all of our model courses are 8-week courses. Week 1, thanks to Carl with his suggestion on Kevin Lynch's work on environmental adaptability, really set the framework of decision modeling. We scoped this case project, we really looked at people of the place, looked at a lot of the values of the people of the place in different assignments in the course, and finally we looked at specifying a methods plan on looking at some of these indicators. I'm really looking at 4 of these courses, or 4 of these weeks in the collaboration sequences. So scoping the case project, how we're doing this as a team, again, I'm giving them data and information, and that is with professional reports. We're giving excerpts and pointing them to certain pages within these hundreds of page documents where they can start finding that relevant information for casing the case project. We had the students work in other teams or individuals. We've offered this twice. We've had different makeups. It's really based on the enrollments, but we want those students to actually pull up the representation linked to the change models, process, impact, evaluation, and decision, and they're just scoping it. They're going to share with their classmates the information of the course, and they're going to present it in VoiceThread. VoiceThread is actually an online presentation package where students can host the presentation. They can voice narrate it if they want. We actually asked them to voice narrate this one. Students can then chime in, circle, make comments, instructor feedback can occur there as well. And so the students actually give a little presentation. So we're not all there synchronously in a presentation. They're posting it, and during a few days, we're hopefully reviewing it. The people of the place was still a refined scoping assignment. We looked at additional information from the Citizens Resource Team that was part of the project. And we also had some lectures, online lectures, including Lisa McElvany and Kellyanne Foster's paper on understanding community stakeholders. And then we then actually refined a thing we're calling a people of the place wheel. This is like alpha, maybe beta version of this wheel. We're hoping to get a really cool wheel that has a lot of good questions as they drill down to the scale. And by the way, this is really where we're addressing scale. If you look at some of these reports, now we're looking at the statewide reports. We also had Federal Highway Administration pieces, so we're looking at larger context as far as how these processes work. I mentioned we asked the students to role play. They actually represented a person of a stakeholder group, and they would go back and refine the scoping. So giving that person's perspective of the questions of the framework, and again, adding that to their voice thread. The ArcGIS Online was really just a simple mapping where they were representing a stakeholder and maybe looking at a space of local significance for that individual stakeholder as if they were participating in this thing. It's a technique that Randy Hester has done with subconscious landscapes. Of course, we can't do a subconscious of a stakeholder. That's a really difficult role play. But it created an online map for the students to see. Mapping values became the really big part of the project where students there was 9 core values identified by the Citizens Resource Team already for the project. Students would select one of those values, essentially the decision that would need to be guided to evaluate scenarios, and then they would actually plug that into a value map tree. So I've heard a couple of presentations already talking about Doug Walker or the Placeways value mapping method with the Orton Foundation. We used that. We had students read those, watch a video on that as well. And so we use a program called MindMeister. Pretty slick program, by the way. You get online, and you're essentially moving things around. There's other programs like OmniGraphy, Visio, but this is a collaboration environment where we can actually see who's actually making all these comments. I put a branch tree in here for just as a template, but we were asking also for these indicators to be to be classified as spatial, temporal, qualitative, quantitative, if it was scientifically based or judgmentally based, or if there's a legal standard to one of those indicators. So this is kind of what it looked like. There's two courses here. The one on the right is what we just had. This is kind of what the final results were on that course. But we see here on the left, at the end of the course, I can run a time lapse on to see who contributed to this mind map for a couple reasons. One, you can see how ideas generated or changed based on there. You can see other people who contributed, and as an assessment, you can see who didn't do anything, right? Maybe the map stayed there and nobody came back in. So using asynchronous technologies like this, you're able to really document actually how the contributions of a team project. If anyone has ever worked in a studio with team projects, very hard to figure out who actually does what, right, in the end of the day. So in the end, we did a synthesize the method where we actually took 3 of the indicators, a qualitative indicator, a quantitative indicator, and one of mixed value that the students then actually applied a known method. And these are, whether it's Tim's method or Paul's method here, or another method that they can look at that actually can evaluate these indicators. So the synthesized method was actually disconnected voice threads, but each student then presented their contribution to their indicators in a draft plan, again, using VoiceThread, and again, with comments from their peers and instructors. So the challenges in this course, project complexity versus enrollment. So we've had a course of 5, we've had a course of 3. Well, we thought we were going to have more than 3, but there is a difference you'd have to change on the scope. So there could be lead lag issues on the collaborators. If you expect someone to have a contribution of a model and they don't, what do you do about that? Something on the third bullet here, and I almost should put this in bold for anybody that's playing an online course, is reserve time in your schedule for online classes. Sometimes online classes feel like out of sight, out of mind. Just because they're not part of your daily work, daily service, you not forget about them, but they're not blocked in. Students need to block this in. Faculty need to block this in. So there is a time that you commit to this course multiple times in the week that you stay on top of it. Also, addressing inconsistent interfaces of the online tools. So future courses we're looking at, we're utilizing scenarios where the students can toggle through things hopefully in GeoPlanner, revise scope of the case project per enrollment, as I mentioned, and develop a shared final deliverable. I'm not a big fan of the multiple voice threads right now. Thank you.